A smart city's got to be about citizens. It's opposed to, I think, where smart cities came from, pushed towards ubiquity, a kind of one data platform to kind of rule them all. It is more about a collection of really, really good use cases that make a tangible difference to people's lives.
Theo Blackwell is London's first Chief Digital Officer. Since being appointed by the Mayor of London in 2017, Theo has been responsible for helping one of the world's most influential cities navigate the opportunities and challenges of the digital age.
Until about 18 months ago, if you were a cyclist in London and you wanted to get from A to B, Google Maps would direct you to the quickest route, which for a cyclist might mean you have taken down the route was the busiest,
right,
or the one that you shared with lorries and other vehicles. Transport for London's team, working in partnership with Google Maps, we've enabled them to change the algorithm so that people are directed towards less busy routes, or where they exist, a cycle path. Now that's used 60 million times a month.
His work spans digital transformation, data, connectivity, innovation, and the emerging role of AI in city governance.
The city data is fundamentally owned by the data owner. There is no central data lake, if you like, for the city. What we do is we just connect rather than collect the data sets across the city. The kind of dystopian view of like all your data goes into one place, is bundled up and sold off to someone else. It's just not the reality.
Along the way, Theo has worked across public policy, technology, startups, and the creative industries, giving him a rare understanding of how technology intersects with people, communities, and place.
The mayor would put it this way. He would go, I am neither an uncritical evangelist or enthusiast, and I'm not a doomsayer or an AI pessimist, but I am an AI realist, that I want to focus on the things that it can do and have an honest conversation with Londoners about it.
Hello, welcome to Talking Place, the podcast bringing placemakers and storytellers together to talk about place. I'm your host, Tanisha Raffiuddin. I am the founder of Concept Culture, a creative agency in London passionate about creating purposeful brands and telling powerful stories. In this episode, I talk place with Theo Blackwell. Before City Hall, Theo spent more than 15 years serving as a councillor in Camden, helping to establish the borough as one of London's leading centres of digital innovation. In this episode, we explore how London has evolved from the smart city movement into the AI era. We discuss digital inclusion, public trust, the role of data in shaping better outcomes, and what London's future might look like by 2050. All right, let's talk place. Theo, welcome to the Talking Place podcast.
Real pleasure to be here.
So we're here at South by Southwest London, as you can see. What I'd love to talk about today is London 2050, what data, AI, and digital infrastructure means for the future of our great city. So this podcast is called Talking Place, and it's about place and what makes a good place. So I'd love to hear from you. What does place mean to you, and what does good look like for you?
Well, it's a really good question. Look, from my perspective, I'm Chief Digital Officer for London. I advise the Mayor on how we join up data across the city, how we get that design thinking that London's famous for embedded in our public services, not just in one place, but across the board, how we do things collectively, how we become the greater than the sum of our parts. And that involves not just redesigning public services, but also respecting place and the diversity of our city. So I've been in this role advising the Mayor for the last 9 years, moving from, I suppose, when I joined, people were talking about smart cities. I think now we're quite firmly embedded in the AI revolution
right,
now.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, the same kind of design principles of human centricity flow through those two sort of eras that we're kind of merging into.
Yeah. The other question I always love to ask my guests is, what is your favorite place in the world?
My favorite place in the world? Well, I came here from the US when I was about 8.
Oh, wow.
And settled in Camden. And so for me, my favorite place for a very, very long time was just kicking around the middle of Camden, seeing my friends, going to see live gigs, just the sheer sort of how vibrant and creative it all was. So I'm sort of pretty much an adopted Camdener, born and bred. That's my favorite place.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I mean, Camden is a special place. It's one of these places in London where, anyone feels welcome, and the market and the canal, and it's such a vibe, especially over the weekend. And now upcoming summer months, it's really one of the top places to be, and I think for locals and visitors alike.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to be an elected representative in Camden for 15 years, and contribute my bit to the changes that we see, and I'm particularly proud of the work that was done around King's Cross. When I grew up, King's Cross was not an area that you'd want to go to unless you were kind of traveling out of London, or late at night you were night clubbing. And the transformation of that area, when I was cabinet member for regeneration for Camden Council, is so profound. I was there the other day. The huge public space that is enjoyed by the community around it, the cultural institutions, the university that's there, the restaurants, the retail offer, and now you've got the, essentially it's a place where the tech sector, particularly from the United States, but not solely, is embedding itself, and so we can see a huge opportunity that almost stretches up Euston Road to Euston Station and Warren Street, which is seeing a massive amount of private investment going into it, becoming a real center of the knowledge economy and frontier AI. So that transformation just kind of continues. And I think the King's Cross development, certainly from our eyes, going back to the days when I was in Camden, was meant to kickstart something new and something special that respects the past, which I think the architecture does sympathetically, but also provides a modern, connected home to the industries of the future.
Yeah. And I think just to echo what you've just said, King's Cross is usually cited in our spaces as a successful place and a welcoming place, and definitely now vying to be the next global tech headquarters.
Yeah, absolutely. Universal, Google, a whole range of frontier AI firms have started up there. So super exciting. And, it's also a place where you can travel to Europe really, really quickly. So it's just a real gateway to our country, to London, and also the North very, very easily. So I'm super excited about how almost like the international image of London can be sort of boosted by what's happening in King's Cross.
Exciting. So going back to your intro, we talked about the smart city. So in today's context, what defines a smart city?
A smart city's got to be about citizens. That sounds a bit glib, but actually there is a philosophy about designing services around user need, using design thinking, understanding people's needs, and acting on them. What is that opposed to? It's opposed to, I think, where smart cities came from, a push towards ubiquity, a kind of one data platform to kind of rule them all. And I think that kind of movement on smart cities has moved away from the technology and embraced the principles of good digital making, which is all about the users. So in the end, a smart city isn't that kind of platform that, as I say, is a sort of panopticon over the city where you can kind of put out the fires and move the buses. Is more about a collection of really, really good use cases that make a tangible difference to people's lives. So our kind of movement in London has been very much closely aligned with the culture of design thinking that comes out of creative industries, the Design Council and others, starting with the problem, not the technology.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that smart cities begin with people, but most people won't see the systems that run a city. So how is London changing in ways that people don't yet notice, or what should people be paying more attention to?
Well, people can certainly see and feel some smart city innovations. For example, when Transport for London about 10 years ago adopted contactless payment on the underground and buses, so you could use your phone to travel. Basically, that effectively meant that that was an example of like an instance of mass adoption, that it helped both the traveling public and also the adoption of contactless payment for the country, because so many people were doing it. So the ease at which someone can pay on a tube journey does things that are very, very tangible. It reduces queues or eliminates queues for ticketing. It makes going in and out of the tube faster. It means that you can run more trains because there are more people coming down. And so Transport for London, for example, has been I think a real banner for people-centered and people-focused real utility in smart cities deployment. And there are a bunch of other examples that flow from that. But if we just take contactless payment for a starting point, that is something that kind of means something in people's lives. It makes a real difference, helps them get around the city quicker.
Absolutely. And has it been 10 years?
Yeah, it's been 10 years.
Wow. As you said that, I'm just trying to
maybe
think.
slightly more.
I haven't seen my Oyster card. I don't know where it lives anymore.
Well, and then you have some cities that haven't even introduced something which contactless essentially overtook, which is an Oyster card.
Yeah.
So whether you're paying on your phone or using your bank card was an innovation that still many cities don't have. Now, Transport for London, also had a major role in the open data movement. Mm-hmm. It's freeing up of its live data feeds of where the buses are and where the tubes are, allows people to wayfind around this, quite complex city to get around. That was a product essentially of the Olympics, and TfL has used that innovation and that maturity to move a step further. Later on this afternoon, I'll just be telling a story about how TfL's data has improved safe cycling in London. The mayor has created around 300 kilometres of cycleways, but until about 18 months ago, if you were a cyclist in London and you wanted to get from A to B, Google Maps would direct you to the quickest route, which for a cyclist might mean you're taken down the route that was the busiest,
right,
or the one that you shared with lorries and other vehicles. And so by TfL's team, Transport for London's team, working in partnership with Google Maps, we've enabled them to change the algorithm so that people are directed towards less busy routes, or where they exist, a cycle path. So the journey might be a bit longer, but it's safer and more comfortable for you as a cyclist. Now that's used 60 million times a month now. Wow. And the technology and the basis behind it has been available to the globe. So the sort of sheer size and scale and forward thinkingness of Transport for London is something that not only has been used as a test bed, but enables like really, really good partnerships with, whether financial services companies or with the likes of Google Maps that can really make a difference to Londoners' lives. So those are the kind of, on a big play level, those are kind of some big plays. But below the surface of that, we've got many, many examples that are kind of, in a sense, narrower, but also really impactful to the kind of challenges people face in living in London or living in any city.
I'm a pedestrian, and for me, having visibility on when the bus is going to show up is a game changer. And then you can make decisions on where to go. London City, people are constantly moving. We're constantly moving. You don't have patience, like 3 minutes for a tube. That also tests our patience. So the ability to see when the bus is going to show up, for me, really makes a big difference. And I think, as you mentioned, like it's not global that you can use a contactless phone on mass transit. So then you're almost like, when I travel, and I travel a lot, I'm like, I get so used to using my contactless.
Exactly. And look, if you're waiting for a tube underground, you now have 4G and in many, many places 5G connectivity because we've used the assets that are underneath the city,
Yes.
the tunnels, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels that already exist, to lay fiber right across the city. And this has enabled us to do two things. One is that you can get a really good signal underground in one of the world's oldest and deepest underground networks. Often, actually, the signal will be better below ground than it could be than it is above ground due to the number of people. But also, that fiber network pops up all across the city wherever there's a TfL, Transport for London asset, whether it's a station or old tram line or whatever. And that enables smart city deployment. It's enabled the upgrade of hundreds of CCTV cameras to fiber so they can see in more detail, they can timestamp more accurately, they can be used for other uses apart from safety. It's enabled connected networks, and it's also enabled those small cells to be put in by telecoms operators so people get better served on mobile connectivity, which is kind of like the next big connectivity challenge, really. How do you stay connected when you're on the move? So we one of our main instruments for smart cityness has been Transport for London and the assets that it owns. And that's enabled us to do further partnerships across the private sector, whether it's schools, NHS, and our 32 boroughs.
I don't know if necessarily having that 5G access on the tube is a good thing, because I remember that would be a time when it was just peaceful because nobody had access, so you would just be on the tube. It's
a matter of debate, and
it is a matter of debate.
It's a matter of debate, and we also respond to what traveling public want. They're quiet carriages on trains and such like. But, I venture to say if you got on a Southwest Rail train, even in London, going out of London, you wouldn't have as good a mobile signal as you do on London Underground.
No,
I think the kind of for the commuting public, and I think the rising expectations of being online, it's increasingly seen as connectivity is a utility. People will increasingly see it and do see it as something that they expect to be there, and when it's not, more furrowed brows.
I'll just give you an example now. We're going through tube strikes, and they seem to be, and sometimes I don't even pay attention to the news, and I don't even realize there's a tube strike, and then I'm on the tube, and I learned that London Bridge is closed, and now I need to know where to go next.
Exactly.
And then so you need that connectivity.
Yeah,
so I do agree,
absolutely.
It's better to have it than not. And then it gives people the choice to use it or not to use it. Because I remember it was outrage when you couldn't. And that was the number one complaint. I don't have signal on the underground.
Right.
You live in London. Why?
Exactly. You don't know it until it's gone. But, Transport for London is just like one part of the puzzle. And when you talk about place, the ability to get to that place and where that place seems nearest to is a really important part of our conception of a city.
Yes.
But the other side of the equation is what's happening with public services at a borough level, and how we're bringing those things together. So we can kind of be like a little bit more greater than the sum of our parts, rather than 32 or more different entities in the same city.
Well, that brings me nicely to my next question. So we are a city of 32 boroughs and a strategic authority. So that's 33 different entities making technology decisions. So how do you build a coherent digital city out of that?
Well, when I joined, there was no way of doing that.
Yeah.
I inherited at the Greater London Authority quite a traditional IT function. There was really good work done on open data. So understanding place, and we made the Greater London Authority had made available lots of open data sets, but it was a bit of an orphan. There was no connection between digital and data, because data is not just there for analysis. Data also allows you to build those good digital services for citizens. There was also no connective tissue between London's boroughs. They were all doing, as you say, their own thing. And, part of it's their democratic right to do that. But there's also a kind of question of why are we doing the same things over and over again. And especially when a new technology drops, for example, today with AI and language models, would you want to experiment 32 times? Would you want to evaluate this 32 times? Or would you want to kind of pool your time and resource? So we set up something called the London Office of Technology and Innovation, which is a public body which doesn't act like the public sector. It acts differently, doesn't run committees. It has a real focus on kind of applied knowledge transfer across the public sector. That means getting the knowledge of those skilled professionals together in a room, doing joint projects together, developing common methods and standards. I mean, all of these things are like the essential plumbing, like of doing things right on the kind of human side. So London Office of Technology and Innovation, created in 2019. It's now doing a huge amount of work on artificial intelligence, trialing and deployment for councils together. And it sits really nicely alongside another thing that we've brought together, which is the City Data Platform. So we have something called the Data for London Library, which is sort of like the antithesis of a smart city data platform. It doesn't actually ingest data. What it does, much like a library, is tell you where that data set is and who has it. So it's open data. So think of a library that you go to at university. There'd be like the equivalent of open data would be you saying, I want that history book, or I want that, the piece of literature, and that will be on shelf over there. And you go out and you access it yourself through the library. And then for the non-open data, which is so essential for personalized services, you're able to find it. And that is much like you order up a book from an archive. You don't get it immediately. You have to show your kind of bona fides. You have to sign the agreement, which we've made easier and more effective. So in that way, we're able to kind of start really using the data and knowledge that sits behind the silos, often legacy silos, in the public institutions in this city. Now that's open for everyone. Our primary user for this service are data users, and they could be commercial ones, they could be members of the public, they could be academics, they could be public sector workers. And so by doing that, by creating that data foundation, we're able to have a much more applied conversation with that network that I just told you about, of bringing those offices together. But ultimately, I think a lot of the things that we would do, quote unquote, as a smart city, serve two audiences. There's a kind of, what can the citizen do better? But also there's a range of initiatives around what can those who serve citizens do better. And those two things have really guided our approach in a number of areas.
Yeah. And I understand that the London Emerging Technology Charter was one of the first of its kind,
yes,
globally. So what problem were you trying to solve at that point?
There was in the built environment, but whether it's in terms of the public sector or the private sector, there was quite a lot of technology dropping in. Like people were sort of piloting drones, they're putting out cameras, connected networks, and there's people had a kind of question of like, okay, well, what are the guidelines on how we should trial and deploy this? Now, some of those questions came from the public, kind of going like, well, you're collecting my data, what are you going to do about it? And how do I know about this, especially if it was on private land? And some of it's from the private sector going, I've got a great idea and I've got a couple of clients in London. What are your kind of tolerance levels on this? So based upon UK privacy law, GDPR, which, critics say, might create some complex barriers for innovation. What we did is we created a charter that lifts essentially what are a set of ethical principles embedded in the law and made them into a series of steps and guidance on how we would expect you to deploy technology. This includes understanding your user need, communicating with the public and allowing the public to communicate back to you, transparency, and then increasingly, after a consultation with the public, we also put in some recommendations around sustainability, because a lot of the new kit that's been put into the city has a kind of half-life of much less than some of the old kit. So like what happens on that kind of smart city sort of, literal ecosystem journey of a piece of kit, where does it go? So those principles there are enable us to have a conversation on some steady ground on smart city technology. It allows our politicians to ask us questions around it, and because it provides a good basis for challenge. And also at its core is transparency. We're the first city to require, certainly our own government, to publish data protection impact assessments, required to do by law. You're recommended to publish them, but you're required to do them. And these often sit in organizations. And we publish all of those as open data. So if you want to know how the police are using live facial recognition technology, or you want to know how boroughs are implementing connected networks or things like that, there's a growing body of kind of privacy literature on how they're doing it in one place.
That was a lot to unpack, but I want to go back to a starting point about the smart city being about people and fundamentally about trust. So how are you deploying AI across the city and addressing the trust factor?
So I think AI and smart cities are kind of very much aligned, right? A lot of smart, in old money, a lot of smart city applications had a form of AI, of what we call narrow AI. They use predictive data analytics for particular purposes. They use live facial recognition for particular purposes. And I think there's a whole host of transport, place, and people applications of those. We use predictive data analytics to really understand the journey of rough sleepers through the various systems in our cities. We use predictive data analytics to understand damp and mold in social housing that is falling under poor condition and the landlord's not doing enough, through to TfL, Transport for London, uses to make our city run smoother. So there's a kind of like a good 10 years of experience in doing all of that stuff. And what we've seen now is obviously language models come into play. So people will be familiar about the products available on their desktop, but using artificial intelligence, for example, to transcribe conversations with clients, to translate, given that we've got very many community languages here in London. This cuts the kind of cognitive load and burden from a lot of frontline officers. It enables them to kind of get through the kind of regulatory statutory guidance easier than essentially filling in forms on a computer. I think that the benefit from that, there'll be some who kind of go, the benefit means that we can have fewer of these workers and we can be more efficient. I think the case remains to be seen. I think it's more a question of value. That's a social worker or someone triaging a homelessness client is able to spend more time face-to-face with them rather than looking down at their notes. The AI allows them to be more human. The next wave of AI that we're seeing bubbling up, I'm sure people talked about it, Southwest London, is agentic AI. And, we need to consider in the same way that we had with language, how that is deployed. But I should say one thing about the current exploration is, at the moment, there's a tremendous amount of experimentation going on. I would say in terms of scale, it's perhaps more at the periphery. But the experimentation, the people who know their own organizations, they know their work with their particular borough populations, have really started looking at this technology in a way that I haven't seen before with other waves of technology.
Wow. And perhaps I can ask, who owns this city data?
The city data is fundamentally owned by the data owner. And so there is no central data lake, if you like, for the city. What we do is we just connect rather than collect the data sets across the city. So we know what data sets Camden has, what data sets Hackney has, and we make it easier for people if they need more data to connect that data. The data is owned legally and ethically by the organization that has it, and they can only use that data with others or in partnership with others if they have jumped through the hoops that are set by our quite strong privacy laws. So the kind of dystopian view of like all your data goes into one place, is bundled up and sold off to someone else, it's just not the reality. The reality is we have a really safe system of holding data according to the organizations themselves, but we now have a better way of connecting it and overcoming, whether it's the technology, cultural or legal barriers, for you to use data in a way that has a clear purpose.
And coming back to place, do you think that there's a risk that the increasing deployment of AI and smart city technology will make a city more efficient, but less accessible, less equitable?
There could be. The use of tools can be both good and bad. I think it can also make our city more legible, more readable for people, more interactive. And that has a variety of public services, cultural or commercial uses. We can make this an easier city to navigate, not just kind of physically, but also in a sort of mental way as well.
So let's say, hypothetically, a developer is building a new neighborhood in London right now, 2,000 homes, a high street, a school, a GP practice. What should they be doing with data and technology?
I think the fundamental thing is what many good developers have done right from the start, is just to understand the particular needs of that neighborhood. Start with the problem, or start with the challenge first, and then build up from there. There'll be some neighborhoods that have had particular challenges with air quality or other environmental factors. There might be a need to design out crime to make it safer, or to extend the cultural offer. All of these things are things where technology has a role to enhance. I would say that the one thing that I'm super keen on, and it might sound a bit, quite techie, is that if your data rests in a silo, it's not going to provide you any value at all. Your data, together with other data, improves the lives of citizens, or your data in the hands of people who can think innovatively can really change lives. So I am against atomization and fragmentation, and in favor of connecting.
So a couple of final thoughts. If London could solve one urban channel through technology alone, what should it prioritize?
The mayor has, I'm going to use two.
Okay,
here.
go for it. Yeah.
The mayor has two big priorities. One is working with the NHS, and there being a closer innovation culture between the NHS and the boroughs to improve health, especially cardiovascular disease. So there's some really exciting things going on there. And remember, we've got 32 boroughs. We've got over 40 NHS trusts as well. So there's like quite, and we've got all of those universities around us. So there's, I think, great health potential there. And the second thing, the mayor is chair of the C40s cities group, which tackle the climate crisis and net zero. Many of our homes in London have been designed for essentially an era with different weather. So our winters might be getting wetter and colder, and our summers might be getting hotter. The big challenge for us is how we retrofit the city, and then also how we build new buildings that aren't just aesthetically beautiful, but also contribute to us becoming a greener city. Those two things are probably quite interlinked, and there could be a study on, like, your health and net zero. But certainly the net zero one has a huge place, dimension here. The buildings themselves, the retrofit, and then also how you efficiently in a city with various generations of buildings manage a retrofit, where on any one street you might have some buildings from the 1930s, some from earlier, some from the 1960s, or any neighborhood. How we understand how to do that rebuild, that kind of retrofit efficiently, not in 32 ways or in hundreds of neighborhood ways, is something that I think technology and data plays a role. Plus, there's a huge behavior change element to that as well, which can't be done, as we know, without technology data.
Well, I'd be very interested in any of the advances in cardiovascular disease. I'm very conscious of my family health history, and that's something that's been playing on my mind a lot as I grow older. So the advances made in cardiovascular research is music to my ears, to be honest.
What does data put in the hands of people help you do? I mean, we've been talking so far almost like about the end result.
Yeah.
It also helps you prevent things.
Yes.
And too many of our public services are based upon someone with an acute need presenting themselves. That means they're in more pain, they're in more misery, and it costs the taxpayer more. So getting our head into the prevention space, it's not just a numbers game, it's a people's game as well, is really, really important. And I do think the kind of the role that place plays in that, both short term and long term, is really, really fundamental.
So what's your message to the next generation, younger people, living and working in London and beyond, and who are concerned about AI taking jobs or replacing them?
Well, the mayor's started an AI task force. You heard about it in South by Southwest, Baroness Lane Fox. We are absolutely focused on understanding, like, what's going on at the moment. If we just relied on government statistics that come out like every year or every 6 months, this would just not give us a clear picture about what's happening to the jobs market, whether there is an impact on younger people, whether it's extra hard to get a job these days, and also like how work's changing. Because I think that, as we've seen from previous technology revolutions, there has of course been like some careers and professions have shrunk or stopped, but also everybody else's job has changed somewhat. So that kind of leads us into how do we refocus what we're doing at the moment to make sure, whether it's apprenticeships, whatever, that young people have as much ability as they can, or opportunity as they can, to get into the jobs market, but also help everyone else in the change of how their jobs will work. I dare say, if you're interviewing someone 15 years ago, there probably would have been 3 people around us.
That's true.
Doing things, and now you can do it on your own. Similarly with jobs in the public sector, there are jobs that will fundamentally change, and that might be quite challenging for people. So we really want to understand that. And secondly, I think it's really important that we don't assume that everybody is just naturally AI literate. I know that everybody's very curious, and people are playing around on Claude and chat and so on. But as we found out from the pandemic, assumptions that certain groups of people were kind of digital natives just turned out to be totally wrong, right? And so I think a form of AI literacy to build people's confidence, for example, in prompting and prompting for their everyday lives, takes us to a place where like AI can be useful in your life. It's not just for them. You know, it can help you plan your 5-year-old's birthday party, which is just what I did. K-pop Demon Hunters themed party.
Yeah.
You know, it can help you get fit. It can help you manage budget. So there are things that we can use these new interfaces for that can help us. And so I think there's just so much to explore, but the most important thing for a city government to do is what the mayor's doing, which is saying we can be active here, not passive, and we can start changing the old ways of doing things to respond to new demands. So we're going to report by July on that. We're fast out of the blocks because I think what happens here in London is happening here in London will be something that happens deeper, and there'll be more of it in a more concentrated way than anywhere else in the country. And so it's right that we don't wait for governments. We're acting because we see things.
Just as you were talking about AI literacy, and we assume that everyone is AI literate, I just recently read a LinkedIn post where someone was talking about, instructing Claude and doing X, Y, Z, and Claude has helped me. And her friend goes, "Oh, is Claude the name of your new assistant?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we just assume that everyone in our circle gets it. But yeah, there's probably a whole camp of people who are not going to touch it or not going to touch it anytime soon.
Yeah, and like there's also something else. It's like when you look in the workforce, without mentioning particular products, there are people who probably are now buying their own private license to one product if they don't feel, their work is either giving them the tools or the tools aren't right. And so people are kind of like finding their way through this. And on the one hand, you could say, that's the sign of something not working. But on the other hand, that's the sign of the human mind working and people finding out, what's good, what's not, what's right for them. So I'd kind of classify where we are at the moment as kind of quite a big age of experimentation, like a few years of experimentation where people are just finding out what's right, finding out what's effective, what are the limits for them as this technology increases. So I think I'm tremendously excited by that. And I kind of, just go back to the point that I made at the beginning about smart cities, which is be wary of anyone who says that this tool will solve everything, or it is the ubiquitous platform into which you can pour all of your hopes, fears, and dreams, and so on.
Yeah.
I think the reality will be, as we saw with smart cities, much more nuanced than that. And I think we're right to be in a kind of experimental stage.
So going back to our starting point, it's 2050 in London. London has been a smart city for over 30 years, let's say. What did we get right? Or also, what did we get wrong?
Yeah. So it's a really, really good question. I certainly think the city will be much more interactive. The buildings themselves will have stories that you'll be able to find out. You're beginning to see it. I think our cultural offer, which is a real strength in London, will be insane. Our transport will have changed. I think we'll definitely see more autonomous vehicles, if not more of the autonomization of things that aren't autonomous, if you see what I mean. Wouldn't be fully autonomous, but they'll be close to it. But I think in terms of London's strengths of diversity and design thinking, I feel that we will have a kind of distinctive edge, and there will be a distinctive London play, which is around really thoughtful, well-built AI tools and other services. Because in a sense, right at the beginning of the digital revolution, we were the first to say, you need to develop methods to understand what people actually need, not necessarily what they want, but what they need, and how you cut through old systems. And I think AI, you don't throw all of that learning out the window just because something's called AI. In fact, you build on it. So I think we could have a distinctive form of AI. And then the final thing I'd say, which sounds a bit abstract, but I think applies whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, which is AI is a tool that allows you to bring together a tremendous amount of knowledge from different places where that knowledge is, whether it's the sentiment of citizens, whether it's conversations with colleagues, whether it's PDFs of economic statistics or rule books. AI can bring that together and put it in front of an experienced practitioner, and they can call out whether something has an opportunity, the problem with something, or it's pure BS. So the potential for AI in the hands of people who really care about this city, enhancing their contribution, is, I think, something that we will see. And that sits alongside all of those kind of customer facing things that people see every day that might make their life easier, or might, if they're not well designed, might not. But I think that kind of, that bringing together of the intellectual property of people to do better things for our city is definitely there. And I'd hope to see that in 2050.
So are you optimistic for our future?
I am optimistic for our future. I've painted quite an optimistic view. I think that my optimism is, the only caveat to my optimism is the kind of vigilance that an active city government and government has to be in the face of technology and technological change. But we've seen from smart cities and the improvements that it's made to Londoners' lives. And I definitely see, positive benefits from all of this. So the mayor would put it this way. He would go, I am neither an uncritical evangelist or enthusiast, and I'm not a doomsayer or an AI pessimist, but I am an AI realist, that I want to focus on the things that it can do and have an honest conversation with Londoners about it.
Well, that does paint a very optimistic future. And on that note, I would like to thank you for talking place with me. I wish you, you and the mayor and the whole JLA team the very best in building our digital and AI future.
Great. Thanks for this discussion.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to join the conversation on social media with the hashtag #TalkingPlace. I would also love for you to leave our podcast a review and subscribe to all our podcasts and YouTube channels so you don't miss an episode. There's so much more to explore when it comes to creating good places, and I'm excited to do a deep dive into other topics with you in our next episode. I'm Tanisha Raffiuddin, and it's been my pleasure to be your podcast host. Thank you for listening. See you again next time, where we'll continue Talking Place. Talk soon.